I want you to just close your eyes for a second and really put yourself in this environment.
All right.
The world around you is just pitch black. You know, you can't see a single thing.
Right.
And all you can hear is this muffled, distorted, just violently rushing sound of water filling your ears. And there's this chaotic, frantic thrashing.
My man.
And then cutting right through the rush of the current, there's the sound of the metal.
Yeah, that heavy, unmistakable sound.
Exactly. The metallic grinding and clinking of ring mail and heavy steel plate. But it's not like clashing in battle on some sunlit field. It is sinking.
Just going straight down.
Deep into thick, suffocating riverbed mud. I mean, just imagine the sheer, crushing physical terror of that exact moment.
It's awful.
The feeling of, what, roughly 100 pounds of steel? The very thing that you spent your entire life believing would protect you, suddenly turning into this literal anchor.
Yeah, it's dragging you down into the dark.
It is a complete, suffocating sensory nightmare. Your heart is just putting out this desperate, solitary thumping rhythm, you know, struggling to keep beating while your lungs are absolutely screaming for air, and your armored boots are finding zero purchase in the muck.
See, that right there strips away every single lie we've ever been told about medieval warfare.
Oh, completely.
It is the absolute antithesis of the songs, because when you break down the physical reality of it, the physics, there is nothing remotely glorious about drowning in your own armor.
No. It's so far removed from the fairy tales, it honestly feels like a different universe. Because, I mean, we all grew up on the bards.
Right, the tropes.
Yeah, we know the tropes. They sing of these knights dying honorably on horseback. They sing of these sweeping, beautiful sunlit fields and the vibrant heraldry waving in the wind.
The heroic final stands.
Exactly. The gleaming, perfectly balanced longsword in hand, while highborn maidens weep for their valor from pristine castle walls. But the mud, the mud at the bottom of a river does not care about your chivalric vows.
It really doesn't.
It does not give a single damn about your noble bloodline or the purity of your cause or like how many tourneys you've won. It only cares about your mass.
Yeah. Gravity and water are just entirely indifferent to human concepts like honor.
True.
And that brutal indifference, honestly, is exactly why we are opening the archives today.
Let's do it.
We are not looking at a fairy tale here. We are stepping into the roles of lore keepers. We're dusting off a forbidden, heavily suppressed, and intensely bloody history today.
Which is what we do best on this deep dive.
Exactly. Our mission today is to dissect the harrowing climax of this historical event, recorded as the Sworn Sword. We are going to extract the dark fantasy lore, the hidden political betrayals, and honestly, the deeply cynical twists that the official chronicles always try to gloss over.
So if you're listening to this, I want you to just pull up a chair, sit by the fire with us, and prepare to unravel the true, staggering cost of loyalty in a world that routinely, almost systematically, punishes the righteous.
It really does.
Because we are taught, culturally, that chivalry is this ultimate, unimpeachable virtue, right? But in the reality of Westeros, honor is very often just a weaponized tool.
Oh, it's a lever.
Yes, a mechanical lever used by the highborn elite to convince the lowborn to bleed out and die for them. It just keeps the geopolitical machinery turning.
It's a system of elite control masquerading as a rigid moral code. And the absolute most dangerous moment in that entire system is when an earnest, truly honorable person collides head-on with the cynical, self-serving reality of the lords who are actually pulling the strings.
Which forces a question that I really want you, the listener, to actively keep in the back of your mind as we descend into this deep dive. Put yourself right in the steel boots of our protagonist for a second.
Okay.
If you discovered that the lord you swore your sword to had looked you dead in the eye and lied to you, if you found out he had committed high treason against the crown, and worse, he was actively demanding that you lead innocent, untrained farmers to a literal slaughter just to appease his own bruised, fragile ego, would you still fight to the death for his honor?
That is the ultimate question.
Right. Where exactly is the line between true, idealized chivalry and just blind, suicidal stupidity?
That is the psychological crux of this entire historical text. What happens when a truly honorable man realizes, while the water is literally filling his lungs, that he is bleeding out in the mud for a total fabrication?
Does he run?
Right? Does he run? Does he surrender to the truth?
Well, spoiler, he doesn't run. He sinks into the abyss, and he is more than willing to drag his enemy down to hell with him.
Yeah, he is.
But to understand how a massive, highly skilled knight ended up literally choking on river mud to protect a lie, We can't start at the river. We have to rewind the clock.
We have to go back to the suffocating summer of 211 AC.
Yes, and meticulously examine the board and the players who set
Yeah.
up this really deadly game of chess.
We really need to establish the baseline reality of 2 and 11 AC because the geopolitical misery of this era dictates every single decision these characters make.
It's grim.
It's so grim. You cannot picture some lush, magical wonderland here. The continent is essentially a traumatized post-apocalyptic landscape. They have just been ravaged by the Great Spring Sickness.
Which is brutal.
Oh, devastating. We know the lore. We know this was a massive pandemic that wiped out tens of thousands, and it completely disregarded class lines, killing everyone from the lowest rat catchers to the High King himself.
Nobody was safe.
Nobody. So it leaves behind this fractured society suffering from immense collective grief and a severe labor shortage.
Yeah, the fields are empty.
Exactly. And as if the biological devastation wasn't enough, nature itself just seems to have turned hostile. A brutal, relentless drought is baking the Reach.
Which changes the entire economic calculus of the realm. I mean, we know the Reach is the breadbasket of the continent.
Right. It's known for food.
It's defined by its abundance, its massive harvests, its sheer caloric output. So when a drought of this magnitude hits the Reach, the psychological and economic impact is just catastrophic.
It's an existential threat.
We aren't just talking about a dry summer. We are talking about crops literally withering in the fields, vital trade rivers drying up to mere trickles, and an oppressive, suffocating heat that just bakes the soil into cracked clay day after day.
Exactly. And when agricultural resources become this scarce, the social contract immediately begins to fray.
It falls apart.
It does. The feudal system relies on the lord providing protection and the small folk providing food. But when the food stops growing, the lord's authority crumbles. Every single drop of water becomes a matter of localized life and death.
Yeah, water is gold now.
And in that kind of highly pressurized, survival-driven environment, old political grievances don't just, fade away into history. They fester. They bake into something highly combustible.
Because when a drought strangles the economy, the people who already lost their wealth in the last war feel the squeeze the tightest. And no one feels that squeeze quite like the first major player on our board, Ser Eustace Osgrey.
Oh, Eustace.
He is the lord of a place called Standfast. Though honestly, using the term lord feels incredibly generous when you look at his actual holdings.
Yeah, it's pretty pathetic.
He rules over this crumbling stone tower. He is a sad, deeply bitter, proud old man. But he spends his entire waking life dreaming of the ancient, lost glory of House Osgrey.
The Chequy Lion.
Right, the Chequy Lion. We know the history. They used to be a massive martial power, commanding entire armies, ruling over vast, rich territories. But that was like a lifetime ago. Now he's just an irrelevant old man in a drafty stone shack, basically obsessing over a checkered flag.
But we have to look at, why he's in that shack.
Right.
It wasn't just the slow decay of time that reduced House Osgrey. It was a singular, devastating political miscalculation. Ser Eustace's entire existence is defined by his status as a pardoned traitor.
The ultimate stain on his honor.
Exactly. We all know the political fault lines of the Blackfire Rebellion. The realm tore itself in two. Eustace Osgrey chose to fight for the rebel faction, the Black Dragon.
And he paid the ultimate price for backing the losing side.
He did. Let's not gloss over the psychological damage of that, though.
Yep.
He fought at the Redgrass Field. He lost his sons in that war.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He didn't just lose a political campaign. His entire bloodline was functionally decimated in front of his eyes. That level of survivor's guilt, combined with the shame of being on the losing side of a civil war, creates a deeply toxic psychological profile.
It does. And the Crown's punishment was designed to perfectly exploit that trauma, wasn't it?
Oh, completely. They didn't execute him. Execution would have made him a martyr.
Right.
Instead, they politically neutered him. The Crown punished his treason by stripping him of all his ancestral lands, his wealth, his garrisons, his castles. They allowed him to keep his life and that one pathetic tower of Standfast, specifically to serve as a humiliating, living monument to his defeat.
That is so cold.
It is. And the absolute ultimate insult, like the twist of the knife by the Crown, was taking his ancestral lands and granting them to his immediate neighbor.
It's the ultimate geopolitical slap in the face, which really forces us to look at the neighbor who benefited from his downfall.
Yes, the second major player.
The second major player in this localized Cold War. and she is an absolute force of nature. Lady Rohanne Webber, the ruler of Holdmoat, the massive, wealthy castle that Eustace's family actually built and used to own.
That's gotta sting.
Oh, you know it does. And she is infamous throughout the Reach. They call her the Red Widow. She is physically quite small, characterized by this striking thick red braid. But her political reputation is utterly terrifying.
Terrifying.
She's been married 4 times,
Yeah.
and all 4 of her husbands are dead.
Which, in a deeply paranoid, hyper-patriarchal society, a woman surviving 4 husbands immediately breeds the most devastating weaponized rumors imaginable.
Of course it does.
The small folk and the rival lords, they harbor that she is a poisoner. A literal black widow spider who consumes her mates to consolidate her own power.
Wow.
Now, whether there is any truth to those rumors or if it is entirely the weaponized gossip of insecure men intimidated by female authority is almost irrelevant.
Because perception is reality.
Exactly. In feudal politics, perception is reality. Her reputation acts as a very deliberate spiked shield. She leans into the fear. She rules her lands with a polished iron fist.
She's not playing around.
Not at all. Unlike Eustace, she doesn't rely on a handful of ragged, half-starved peasants. She commands a highly trained, exceptionally well-equipped professional cavalry. She is a ruthless survivor operating in an incredibly hostile, predatory political landscape.
Okay, I have to push back slightly on how secure she actually is, though.
Okay, fair.
She has the cavalry and the fearsome reputation, but she is operating under a massive, inescapable legal ticking clock. Her father, even in death, managed to trap her. The will. His will explicitly stipulated that she must remarry within a highly specific time frame, or she will be legally stripped of all her lands, all her titles, and all her wealth, including the lands taken from Eustace.
So she's cornered.
She is cornered by feudal law. She is surrounded by ambitious, violent men who want to conquer her territories through a forced marriage, and she's trying to manage an agricultural estate during a catastrophic drought.
It's a complete pressure cooker. You have 2 leaders who are fundamentally, ideologically at odds, sharing a border during a resource crisis.
Yeah.
One is a pragmatic, hyper-vigilant survivor looking desperately to the future to secure her precarious position. The other is a living ghost, haunting his own miserable life, utterly obsessed with a past that he threw away through his own treason.
You know, it reminds me of a modern dynamic. Okay, let's unpack this. Eustace is like a disgraced former corporate CEO who was ousted for insider trading, right?
Okay, I can see that.
And he's living in a dilapidated, leaky shack and staring out his window every single day at the gleaming corporate headquarters next door. The headquarters he literally built.
Right.
He is completely blinded by his own toxic nostalgia. He wakes up every day, looks at Holdmoat, feels the agonizing sting of his own failure, but he masks it with these grand delusions of stolen valor. He convinces himself he is the victim.
I think the CEO analogy works on a superficial level, but we really have to remember the stakes here are visceral, not just financial. A fired CEO doesn't have the legal authority to draft his neighbors into a militia. If we connect Eustace's toxic nostalgia and profound survivor's guilt to the harsh environmental realities of the drought, we see the exact mechanism that sets this conflict ablaze.
The spark.
Yeah, you have a socioeconomic landscape that is literally and metaphorically parched, just waiting for someone to drop a match.
And the match strikes with terrifying speed. Because when resources dry up, diplomacy is the very first casualty. We have our inciting incidents, and the escalation is rapid. First, a stream, the Chequy Water, which is an absolutely vital lifeline in this drought, is discovered to be dammed up.
Someone cut off the water.
Exactly. The water is pooling on Webber land, leaving Osgrey land bone dry. Then, almost immediately after, a forest known as Watt's Wood, which technically belongs to Eustace, goes up in flames.
A massive fire.
A massive forest fire. Thick plumes of black ash are choking the summer sky, destroying valuable timber and hunting grounds. And Sir Eustace, blinded by decades of paranoia and resentment, instantly points the finger at the Red Widow.
Of course he does.
He accuses her of an act of unprovoked economic warfare, damming his water to starve his people and burning his land to humiliate him.
But the tension isn't just theoretical posturing at this point. Blood has already been spilled, and it was spilled over the dam.
Right, it gets physical.
Sir Eustace has 2 hedge knights in his service. One is our protagonist, Sir Duncan the Tall, or Dunk, and the other is a man named Sir Bennis of the Brown Shield. We need to analyze Bennis for a second because he represents the absolute worst of the roaming martial class.
Oh, he's awful.
He is. Bennis is, to put it mildly, a violent, opportunistic coward. Upon discovering the dam in the stream, Venice didn't try to negotiate. He didn't seek an audience with Lady Rohanne to discuss water rights.
No.
He drew his sword and deeply, permanently slashed the face of one of Lady Rohanne's peasants who was working on the dam. He mutilated an unarmed member of the small folk.
Okay, but why does he do that, though? If Bennis is a coward, why initiate violence? Seems like a massive miscalculation.
Because terror tactics are the refuge of the outmatched.
Oh,
Venice knows he can't fight Webber's polished cavalry, so he enacts violence on the absolute lowest rung of the social ladder to project false strength.
that makes sense.
It's a pathetic attempt to assert dominance without actually risking his own life against a trained opponent. But in doing so, he forces Lady Rohanne's hand.
So let's look at the board now. We have stolen water, a burning forest, and a mutilated peasant. Eustace demands war.
War over a tiny stream.
Yeah. He feels his ancient ancestral honor has been slighted, so he issues this horrific, completely delusional command. He orders Dunk and Sir Bennis to go out into his tiny, starving villages, pull these terrified farmers out of their homes, arm them with literal pitchforks, scythes, and sharpened sticks, and rally them into a makeshift militia to march against House Webber's professional, fully armored knights.
We have to pause and deeply analyze the sociopolitical mechanics of that order. It is, without exaggeration, a suicide mission.
Completely.
And not a heroic one. If these slack-jawed, malnourished villagers march against the heavy horse of Coldmoat, it won't be a battle. It will be an absolute slaughter.
They'd be wiped out.
Ridden down and routed in minutes. But worse than that, what happens if they march and actually survive? They have been pulled away from whatever meager crops they have left. A lord pulling peasants from the fields during a drought is essentially sentencing their families to starvation come winter.
Oh, wow.
And this exposes the grand, ugly truth about honor in Westeros.
It completely deconstructs the myth, doesn't it?
Entirely. We hear the highborn lords talk endlessly about their honor, their vows, their sacred duties. But in practice, the concept of honor is incredibly one-sided.
Yeah.
Sir Eustace is perfectly willing to sacrifice the lives of dozens of innocent villagers, men he swore a sacred oath to protect when he became their lord, just to satisfy a petty, localized pissing contest over his wounded pride.
It's disgusting.
The lives of the small folk are treated as disposable currency, spent recklessly to buy back a fraction of his lost dignity.
But Dunk is the anomaly in this system. Dunk is our window into this nightmare, and he does not share Eustace's callousness.
No, he doesn't.
Let's look at Dunk's profile. He's this towering, massive guy, nearly 7 feet tall. He's deeply impoverished. He owns almost nothing but his dented armor, his war horse, and his rigidly held ideals of what a true knight should be. We also know he travels with his squire, Egg, who is secretly a prince of the royal Targaryen bloodline, traveling in disguise to learn about the harsh realities of his future kingdom.
Which is a whole other layer of crazy.
Exactly. And Dunk looks at these terrified, trembling farmers holding their sharpened sticks, and he makes a profound, potentially treasonous choice.
He rebels.
He rebels against his lord. He flat out refuses the order. He tells the peasants to go home, to hide in their cellars, to survive. He completely disperses the militia, effectively stripping Eustace of his entire army.
Good for him.
Right. And instead, Dunk makes the decision to saddle his warhorse and ride out to feast the massive forces of Coldmoat entirely alone.
It's a remarkable moment of moral clarity, but it's also steeped in this incredibly complex, almost contradictory web of knightly duty.
How so?
Well, he absolutely refuses to let innocent small folk die for a lord's bruised pride, which is noble. But simultaneously, he still feels completely bound to serve the lord who hired him, even when he suspects that lord is fundamentally in the wrong.
Okay, wait, here's where it gets really interesting. I have to jump in here and push back on Dunk's logic, because this is where the romanticism really crashes into his own detriment.
Okay.
Dunk isn't stupid. He grew up in the gutters. By this point in the timeline, he already knows the truth. He knows that Eustace is a pardoned traitor who fought for the Black Dragon.
Right, he found out.
More importantly, he knows that Eustace flat out lied to him about the legal rights to the Chequy Water.
Yes.
Dunk found out that the crown legally stripped those water rights from Eustace and formally granted them to the Red Widow decades ago. Dunk knows that this entire impending battle is built on a foundation of Eustace's lies. So why on earth is Dunk still strapping on his steel and riding out there?
That's the tragedy.
Is his rigid, unbending adherence to his knightly vows actually his fatal flaw? Is he so desperate to validate his own identity as a true knight that he's willing to die defending a proven liar?
You've hit on the brilliant contradiction of his character. Dunk grew up in Flea Bottom, arguably the worst, most brutal slum in the capital. He knows exactly how ugly and transactional the world is.
He's seen it firsthand.
Right. But paradoxically, because he grew up in the gutter, he holds on to the idealized, pristine vision of knighthood tighter than anyone who was actually born into a castle.
Well, that's fascinating.
To Dunk, knighthood is his only escape from being a flea-bottom thug. He believes that if he breaks his sworn vow to Eustace, even though Eustace is a manipulative liar, then the concept of knighthood itself means nothing.
He has to believe in it.
He applies an inflexible, absolutist morality to a highly flexible, deeply corrupt political landscape. And that exact inflexibility forces him into one of the most tense, politically charged standoffs in the entire history of the Reach.
Oh, the standoff.
Because Dunk forces the blood debt into the open, he corners Rohanne politically. She can't back down without her men turning on her, and Eustace won't apologize. That political trap physically manifests in the only place they can possibly meet.
Which brings us to the Chequy Water itself. Because Dunk riding out alone leads directly into a cinematic masterpiece of a scene, but it's a scene built entirely on tactical constraints.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Dunk rides his massive warhorse directly into the middle of the shallow, rushing stream. And on the other bank, waiting for him, is the Red Widow, Lady Rohanne, surrounded by the gleaming steel of her polished cavalry.
What an image.
Right. And instead of ordering her men to shoot him down, she rides her own horse out to meet him. They literally conduct a diplomatic parley sitting on horseback right in the middle of the rushing water.
We have to analyze the environmental acoustics of why they're meeting there, because it's not just for dramatic visuals.
It's practically.
It is a highly calculated, necessary political maneuver. The rushing water of the stream is loud. The current physically drowns out their conversation so that their respective armies, waiting tensely on the banks, cannot hear the specific terms of the political negotiations taking place.
So smart.
It creates a private, isolated, acoustical bubble of diplomacy in the absolute center of a battlefield. It allows them to speak frankly, to negotiate, and to potentially compromise without losing face in front of their armed retainers.
I mean, imagine being Duncan in that moment. You are trying to negotiate the survival of an entire region, and you have to shout your diplomacy over the roaring current, knowing that if you say the wrong thing, the archers on the bank will feather you in seconds.
No pressure.
And the reality of Lady Rohanne's situation makes her incredibly dangerous in this parley. We discussed her reputation. She is a female lord ruling in a hyper-aggressive man's world, surrounded by vassals and rivals who desperately want to believe she is weak or hysterical or a witch.
They're waiting for her to slip up.
Exactly. She cannot, under any circumstances, look weak in front of her own garrison. If she backs down from Eustace's insults, her authority evaporates overnight. So sitting in that stream, looking up at this giant hedge knight, she demands blood for the peasant that Ser Bennis mutilated. She demands a brutal physical justice. She essentially tells Dunk, your side permanently disfigured my man. I am legally required to extract a pound of flesh to prove to my people that I am capable of protecting them.
It is the inescapable, brutal logic of the feudal blood feud. If a physical grievance goes unanswered, it acts as an invitation for further aggression from rival lords.
It's a domino effect.
She is completely trapped by the optics of power. She doesn't necessarily want a war over a peasant, but the political mechanics of her rule demand retaliation.
So Dunk, realizing that diplomacy has failed and the logic of the blood feud is absolute, does something so visceral and so shocking, it completely shatters the dynamic of the parley.
It really does.
He looks down to the Red Widow, he draws his own razor-sharp dagger, and without a second of hesitation, he slices his own cheek wide open.
Deep.
A cheek for a cheek. He physically pays the blood debt himself, right there in the rushing river. He bleeds down his own armor for his lord's sins because he knows Sir Eustace is far too proud and Bennis is far too cowardly to ever face justice themselves.
It is a stunning, incredibly transgressive act of self-sacrifice, and it severely unbalances Lady Rohanne.
She didn't expect it.
Not at all.
Yeah.
She didn't want Dunk to bleed. She wanted Bennis, the man who actually committed the crime. But legally and technically, the ancient laws of retaliation have just been satisfied in front of her. The blood debt for the present is paid. Exactly. However, that only solves half the geopolitical problem. What's fascinating about feudal law is that even with the physical retaliation settled, Rohanne still has a massive crisis of honor to deal with.
With fire.
Sir Eustace has publicly, loudly accused her of arson, of burning Wat's wood to the ground. In this society, that is a grievous, potentially treasonous insult to her honor and her legal standing.
She can't let that go.
She demands total vindication for that accusation. She demands Eustace retract it publicly. And because Eustace is a bitter old man who will never back down, the only legal recognized mechanism left to resolve this stalemate without initiating a full-scale massacre between their armies is a trial by combat.
Look at the incredible, completely asymmetrical stakes of this exact moment. So what does this all mean? Put yourself in Dunk's headspace. He's sitting on his warhorse, literally bleeding profusely down his own face, desperately trying to absorb the violence into his own physical body, just to prevent a war that will slaughter innocent farmers who didn't ask for any of this.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Red Widow is playing 4D chess just to maintain her authority over her own violent men and keep her lucrative lands from being usurped by her rivals. The scales of this conflict are wildly unbalanced.
It's pure survival on both sides, just different kinds.
Exactly. Dunk is operating on pure, desperate empathy and an absolutist view of honor, while she is operating on the cold, hard, inescapable mathematics of geopolitical survival.
And because neither of their respective value systems allows them to compromise any further, the trial by combat is legally set. But the geographical reality of their feud creates one final, bizarre complication.
Where do they fight?
They cannot agree on where the duel should physically take place. Dunk absolutely refuses to fight on Webber land, as it would symbolize submitting to her jurisdiction.
Makes sense.
And Rohanne cannot allow her champion to fight on Osgray land for the exact same legal reasons, so they are forced by their own rigid honor codes to fight in the only neutral territory available to them.
The stream itself, the exact dividing line between the territories.
Precisely. They agree to fight in the rushing water of the Chequy Water, which sets the stage for a horrifying physical reality.
Yeah, water and heavy armor.
The bards sing of combat on solid, sunlit ground. These two men are about to find out exactly what happens when you introduce mud, rushing currents, and heavy steel armor into a fight to the death.
And Dunk is not fighting a nobody. We have to introduce the antagonist here, the champion chosen to represent the Red Widow. His name is Ser Lucas Longinch, but he is universally known as the Longinch.
The Longinch!
And he is a terrifying physical specimen. He is 6'7" tall, a giant of a man. He wields a massive two-handed poleaxe. He serves as Cold Moat's castellan, which makes him essentially the supreme military commander of her forces.
He's not a guy you want to mess with.
Not at all. And his internal motivation for this fight is incredibly grim. The Longinch doesn't give a damn about the burnt forest, and he certainly doesn't care about the mutilated peasant.
He has his own agenda.
He intends to win this duel, visually prove his ultimate martial supremacy over her forces, and then use that immense political leverage to marry the Red Widow by force, thereby stealing her lands, fulfilling the terms of her father's will, and claiming her immense wealth for himself. He is the absolute embodiment of the predatory, ambitious men circling her domain.
The Longinch is a brutal, terrifying pragmatist. He is heavily armored, immensely strong, and we have to talk about his weapon.
Oh, the poleaxe.
He is armed with a poleaxe, which is a weapon specifically designed by medieval engineers to defeat heavy plate armor. A poleaxe isn't an elegant, sweeping longsword meant for cinematic duels.
That's not pretty.
It's a heavy, crushing, utilitarian tool meant to dent steel, shatter the bones beneath the armor, and physically batter an opponent into submission through sheer concussive force.
This is where we really have to act as historians
Yeah.
and completely tear away the romanticism of medieval combat. The bards are lying to you. There is no sunlit arena here. There are no cheering crowds throwing flowers from the stands.
None of that.
It is two giant, heavily armored men mounted on massive, terrified war horses, charging at each other directly into the middle of a rushing, muddy stream.
Yeah.
And the resulting collision is violent, and it is unspeakably ugly.
The impact alone.
The Longinch swings that massive poleaxe with all his momentum, and the heavy blade splinters Dunk's wooden shield into 1,000 pieces instantly. The sheer kinetic force of the subsequent blows dents Dunk's steel armor, physically driving the metal inward against his ribs, making it agonizing to even breathe.
Oh, man.
It's a devastating, completely overwhelming display of brute force, and the physical impact is so severe that both men lose their balance and are knocked clean off their barded horses.
And this is the exact moment where the environment becomes the primary weapon in the duel.
The water.
Falling off a warhorse while wearing full plate armor is dangerous enough on dry land. The impact alone can easily break a collarbone or snap a neck, but falling into rushing water while wearing nearly 100 pounds of steel changes the biomechanics of the fight entirely.
It's a nightmare.
The water resistance slows every swing, the mud sucks at their boots, destroying their footwork. They aren't just fighting each other anymore, they're fighting the river itself.
The duel instantly devolves. It goes from a nightly, mounted joust to a visceral, ugly, savage wrestling match in the thick mud. There is absolutely no elegant swordplay happening here. It's just frantic thrashing.
Right.
The sheer weight of the steel is acting exactly like an anchor, dragging them both down into the abyss. Every single time Dunk tries to rise to his feet, the current pushes against his battered chest, the mud acts like a vacuum on his boots, and the Longinch is right there, relentlessly battering him back down.
It's just pounding him.
Dunk is bleeding profusely from multiple blunt force wounds. His muscles are completely flooded with lactic acid. He is utterly exhausted, and most importantly, he is actively suffocating.
And this is where the highborn martial training completely fails, and Dunk's traumatic origins are the only thing that saves his life.
Flea bottom.
Exactly. If Dunk had tried to fight like a highborn knight in that water utilizing proper stances, honorable techniques, and chivalric rules of engagement, he would have died in that stream within minutes. The Longinch was objectively stronger, better equipped, and more experienced.
On paper, Dunk loses.
100%. But Dunk didn't learn how to fight in a pristine castle courtyard under the tutelage of a master-at-arms. He learned to survive in the pitch-black alleys of Flea Bottom, the most dangerous cutthroat slum in the known world.
Yes. The flea bottom instincts take over. It's pure, desperate, animalistic survival. Dunk realizes in a split second that he cannot possibly beat the Longinch with a weapon. So he throws the entire chivalric rulebook away.
He just abandons it.
He lunges and physically grapples the massive knight. He tackles the Longinch beneath the surface of the rushing, murky water. He uses his own massive size, his superior weight, and whatever leverage he has left to forcefully pin the Longinch face down in the thick, suffocating mud of the riverbed.
Oh, wow.
He just holds him down. The Longinch thrashes violently, his heavy armor clanking and grinding under the water, fighting with everything he has for a single breath of air. And Dunk just holds him there. He ignores the agonizing pain of his own wounds, he ignores the desperate burning in his own lungs, and he waits.
That is so dark.
He holds the Longinch down until the violent thrashing finally weakens. He holds him until the last bubbles stop rising to the surface of the Chequy Water. He literally, brutally drowns him in the mud.
What's truly fascinating here is the sheer mechanical terror of the victory. It is such a grim, unflinching deconstruction of the fantasy genre.
It really is.
The bards never sing about the mud. They never compose ballads about the frantic, pathetic, undignified struggle for oxygen. But in the physical reality of this world, gravity and water are far more deadly and far more efficient than a finely forged sword.
Yeah.
The hero wins the duel, yes, but he only wins by committing an act of desperate, suffocating brutality that will haunt him forever.
And the physiological toll it takes on Dunk's own body is massive. He's taken far too much concussive damage from the poleaxe, and in the agonizing struggle to hold the Longinch down, Dunk's own lungs inevitably fill with river water.
Right, he's drowning too.
The adrenaline finally runs out, and we get this horrifying, incredibly eerie transition in the narrative. The violent thrashing stops, the roaring sound of the river fades into a muffled hum, and Dunk's vision goes completely black. He drowns too.
Or at the very least, he comes as close to clinical death as a human body can without crossing the threshold permanently.
Right. He completely blacks out. He succumbs to the water, and days later he slowly wakes up. We learn he was dragged from the river by his squire, Prince Egon. But what's truly wild, the hidden lore in this survival, is how he survived.
Oh, this part is crazy.
He wasn't saved by a traditional maester. He was resuscitated by an ironborn maester, a healer who culturally worships the drowned god.
Yeah.
This specific master used crude, ancient, deeply religious CPR techniques, basically forcing the river water out of Dunk's lungs through physical pressure and violently breathing life back into him. It's a miraculous, agonizing, almost supernatural survival.
He fought for an absolutist vision of honor. He went down into the dark abyss, and he was quite literally resurrected by the followers of a god of drowning. So psychologically, when Dunk finally opens his eyes days later, he has certain deeply ingrained expectations about how the world should work now that he has survived the ordeal.
Exactly. Put yourself back in his boots. He wakes up. He's not choking on mud anymore. He is lying in an incredibly soft, comfortable bedchamber inside Castle Coldmoat. The sun is shining through the window. And Dunk, despite his cynicism and his flea-bottom upbringing, is still a young man who desperately wants to believe in the stories.
He wants the fairy tale ending.
He expects the romantic reward that the bards always promise the victorious knight. He expects a hero's welcome. He fought valiantly against a monster. He killed the man who was threatening the lady's sovereignty, and he miraculously survived. Furthermore, leading up to the duel, there had been this profound, undeniable romantic tension between Dunk and the Red Widow. A real connection. He expects her to be sitting at his bedside when he wakes. He expects profound gratitude, tears of relief, maybe even love.
But Westeros is not a romance novel. It is a highly efficient, unsentimental, and utterly ruthless political machine. And the truth that Dunk wakes up to is entirely devastating to his worldview.
Which brings us to the spicy plot twist, as the archival sources so perfectly described it. Dunk slowly forces himself out of bed. He's bruised, black and blue, he's battered, his ribs are aching, he's literally still coughing up rancid river water.
He's in rough shape.
He slowly walks down the stone steps into the great hall of the castle. And he doesn't find a solemn vigil praying for his recovery. He finds a massive, incredibly grand feast.
A party?
There is loud music playing, there is expensive wine flowing, there is raucous laughter echoing off the walls, and sitting right there at the high table looking incredibly smug and victorious is his lord, Ser Eustace Osgrey. And sitting right beside him, holding his hand, wearing a ceremonial bridal cloak, is the Red Widow, Lady Rohanne Webber.
While Dunk was unconscious, locked in a dark coma and fighting for his very life against the stagnant water in his lungs, the two lords completely solved their geopolitical crisis. They bypassed the blood feud entirely. They simply got married.
Okay, wait, I have to stop here because the sheer audacity of this twist is mind-blowing. And calling it Machiavellian brilliance feels too clean.
It's ruthless.
Dunk nearly died. He drowned a man with his bare hands to settle a blood feud between these two specific people, and the very second he was unconscious and out of the picture, they just signed a piece of parchment, drank some wine, and nullified the entire conflict. Was this a master plan all along, or just grotesque opportunism?
It is the ultimate capitalization on a crisis. If we break down the brutal pragmatism of it, it makes perfect, horrifying sense. Look at it strictly from their respective political perspectives.
Okay, let's hear it.
For Ser Eustace, the bitter pardoned traitor, this is his ultimate lifelong victory. By marrying Lady Rohanne, he instantly, legally reclaims Coldmoat. He gets to move out of his dilapidated, drafty tower and sit in the high, wealthy seat of his ancestors once again.
He gets his castle back.
He didn't win it back with a glorious army like he dreamed. He won it with a desperate wedding vow after his champion was neutralized.
And for Lady Rohanne, the opportunism is even more staggering. We talked about that legal ticking clock, her father's will demanding she marry or lose her entire livelihood.
Right, the will.
The Longshot was violently trying to force her to marry him to steal her power. When Dunk killed the Longinch, she removed her immediate physical threat, but the legal threat of the will remained. By marrying the elderly, politically weak Ser Eustace, she fulfills the strict legal terms of the will at the absolute last possible minute.
It solves her problem instantly.
She keeps her lands, she retains her power over her cavalry, and crucially, this is the darkest part, Eustace is an incredibly old, frail man. She knows with absolute certainty that she will vastly outlive him.
Oh, she's playing the long game.
She marries him to secure the immediate legal crisis, knowing full well that in a few short years he will die of natural causes, and she will rule the combined Webber and Osgrey territories entirely independently. It is ruthless.
It is a marriage of pure, unadulterated political convenience. The war was canceled instantly. The blood feud over the peasant that was supposedly so incredibly important, the wounded honor that demanded innocent farmers march to their deaths with pitchforks, all of it vanished into thin air the second a mutually beneficial financial and legal contract could be signed.
It makes my blood absolutely boil on Dunk's behalf. It is so deeply cynical. Think about it in modern terms. It's like getting into a literal knife fight in a dark alley to defend your company's honor against a rival CEO.
Yeah.
Taking a brutal stab wound to the gut, ending up on life support in a coma for a week, and waking up to find out your boss just merged with the rival firm, took a massive golden parachute payout, and they didn't even bother to invite you to the celebratory corporate retreat.
It's the ultimate betrayal.
It completely, utterly shatters the illusion of chivalry for him. Dunk realizes with crushing, humiliating clarity that he was nothing but a pawn. He was a disposable piece of muscle who choked on mud to settle a dispute the highborn lords fixed the second it became convenient for their bottom line.
This realization is the core tragedy of the story and the core lesson of Westerosi history. Dunk realizes that his rigid, absolutist adherence to his vows almost got him killed for a conflict that the instigators didn't even truly care about on a moral level.
They just cared about property.
They cared about power, water rights, and property. When fighting served their interests, they demanded Dunk fight and bleed. When marrying served their interests, they married. Dunk's sacred honor was just a tool they used to manipulate the board until a better, more efficient tool presented itself.
The twisted, cynical reality of this world leaves Dunk with only one path forward, and it's an incredibly bitter one, which leads us to the melancholic, atmospheric ending of the Sworn Sword. Dunk is actually offered a place in their new, combined, wealthy household.
Right, they try to keep him.
The Red Widow, perhaps out of a sliver of genuine guilt, even offers him a magnificent, wildly expensive courser to replace the war horses that were injured and killed in the duel. It's a bribe, essentially. A feudal golden parachute to make him feel better about being so thoroughly used.
But he refuses the horse, and that refusal is vital. Accepting the courser would mean formally accepting their version of the world, a world where honor can be bought and sold, where blood debts and near-death experiences can be neatly erased with a shiny new saddle and a bag of gold.
So he takes absolutely nothing of material value from them. He accepts only a passionate parting kiss from the Red Widow, acknowledging the genuine human connection they actually shared beneath all the suffocating politics. And he asks for a single lock of her fiery red hair.
Just a lock of hair.
He ties that lock of hair to his worn-out, battered saddle, mounts his surviving horse, and he and his royal squire, Egg, ride away from the imposing walls of Coldmoat. And, almost too fittingly, the terrible, suffocating drought finally breaks at that exact moment.
Of course it does.
But the weather doesn't bring relief. They ride away into a pouring, miserable, freezing rain. It's such a cinematic, deeply bitter departure. It perfectly reiterates the harsh lesson of this deep dive. The great lords play their Game of Thrones in warm, dry castles, toasting their cleverness, but the small folk and the earnest hedge knights are the ones who drown in the mud to facilitate their moves.
It's a stark, uncompromising reminder of the brutal class divide in Westerosi history. And yet, if we step back from Dunk's immediate heartbreak and look at the macro historical timeline, the story of the Red Widow does not end in that pouring rain.
Oh, no, it doesn't.
There is a massive, chilling piece of historical lore hidden in the epilogue of her life that connects this intimate, muddy little regional dispute to the absolute grandest conflicts in the history of this world.
Yes, the heraldry shift. The moment where the localized history becomes legendary. Tell the listener exactly what happens to Lady Rohanne Webber after Dunk rides away.
Lady Rohanne's ruthless pragmatism served her incredibly well, exactly as she planned. As predicted, she significantly outlives the frail old Ser Eustace.
Naturally.
He passes away quietly, and she remains the formidable, undisputed Lady of Coldmoat. But her ambition doesn't stop at the borders of the Reach. Her political acumen and her sheer talent for survival catch the eye of one of the most powerful men on the entire continent. She eventually leaves Coldmoat and marries Lord Gerald Lannister.
The Golden Lion himself, the absolute pinnacle of Westerosi power.
Precisely. She leaves the Reach entirely and becomes the Lady of Casterly Rock. The Red Spider of House Webber is formally replaced by the Golden Lion of House Lannister, and through this marriage, Lady Rohanne Webber becomes the direct, secret great-grandmother of Tywin, Jaime, Cersei, and Tyrion Lannister.
Which is absolutely mind-blowing when you trace the psychology. When you look at her character in 211 AC, her ruthless pragmatism, her ability to legally outmaneuver her enemies, her willingness to weaponize marriage, and her own terrifying reputation to secure her family's legacy, you can see the exact genetic and psychological blueprint of Tywin and Cersei Lannister.
You really can. The apple did not fall far from the tree.
The moment the heraldry shifts from the Webber Spider to the Lannister Lion, you can immediately see the origin story of the political ruthlessness that defines the Casterly Rock we know today.
The legacy of Coldmoat absolutely echoes in the halls of Casterly Rock generations later. They inherited her survival instincts. But her story has one final, intensely dark chapter that the Maesters gloss over.
Oh, this part always gets me.
She becomes incredibly powerful as the Lady of Casterly Rock. She successfully provides Lord Gerald with multiple heirs, securing the Lannister lineage. But shortly after giving birth to her fourth son, a boy named Jason, This brilliant, cunning, highly visible, high-profile woman simply vanishes.
She completely disappears from the face of the earth.
The historical records, the official chronicles written by the maesters, merely note that she vanished under mysterious circumstances. She was never seen again, nobody was ever found, no definitive explanation was ever recorded.
Which begs so many chilling questions for anyone studying this lore. Did the ghosts of her violent past finally catch up to her? Were there enemies from her days as the Red Widow in the Reach, who harbored a grudge for decades and finally took their revenge? Or, perhaps much more likely, in the cutthroat, venomous world of Casterly Rock politics, was she murdered by her ambitious new family? Did Lord Gerald, or a jealous rival in the Lannister court, decide she was far too powerful, too clever, and too dangerous to be kept alive once she had fulfilled her duty and provided the necessary heirs? It is an incredibly dark, unresolved mystery in the archives.
It highlights the ultimate cynical truth of this universe. Even the most brilliant, adaptable players of the game are never truly safe from the board they are playing on.
Exactly. But I want to leave you with one final original thought to mull over. Building on everything we've uncovered in these dark archives today, we've spent this entire time analyzing Lady Rohanne Webber's incredible, almost supernatural talent for political survival. We've seen her ruthless pragmatism firsthand.
We have.
We've watched her masterfully use a marriage of convenience to escape a deadly, suffocating trap set by the Longinch and the restrictive laws of her society. So, ask yourself this. What if she wasn't murdered at all? What if Tywin Lannister's grandmother, the ultimate survivor who always found a way out of a corner, deliberately engineered her own mysterious disappearance?
Oh, that's a wild thought.
Right. What if she realized that the golden cage of Casterly Rock was just as dangerous and just as suffocating as the enemies of her youth? What if she quietly faked her own death to escape it, slipping away into the shadows on her own terms and leaving behind a legacy of ruthless cunning that would ultimately define House Lannister forever? Keep digging into the lore because the mud always hides the truth.